I, Methuselah, witness to the unfolding of many events, have sought to inscribe these chronicles for the generations to come, for all the righteous souls who endure. It is my desire to record the tales of all kingdoms and lands, the highland, the middle land, and the ocean realm, so that those who follow may learn and draw wisdom from them. In those days, the world was under the dominion of one kingdom, the kingdom of Cain, who hailed from the east and ruled over the entirety of the land, the ocean, and all that lay within. His kingdom was marked by corruption, and he sought to extinguish all who upheld righteousness. Those not aligned with his kingdom were taken to the centers of his domains, where they faced great trials and were known among many, unable to withstand the torment. Thus, the world was cleaved in twain, with half of its expanse being land and the other half water, divided by a great divide. There existed the highland, the lowland, and the ocean land. In the highland, certain creatures dwelt. In the middle land, certain beasts roamed, and in the ocean, varied creatures thrived. Each being had its realm, and each kingdom was segregated by regions and elevations, separate and distinct. In the land of the west, there arose a gathering of people from the middle land, who, though not righteous themselves, sought to overthrow the kingdom of Cain. Driven by their own desire for power, they conspired to summon beasts from the field and the swamp. These were no ordinary creatures. They were massive reptilian beings with giant heads, bred to become more vicious with each generation. As they bred these creatures into a formidable force, they unleashed them upon the land of Cain. These monstrous beings ravaged the villages, devouring cattle and livestock, and causing great fear among the people. They hid in caves and highlands, striving to survive against the onslaught of these fearsome beasts. And lo, there were other beasts in the swamp and in the wild places, creatures of immense size, with necks that stretched like the cedars and tails that swept the ground behind them. Greater still were these than the former, and they moved slowly, yet none could stand before them. And behold, there were also those with many spikes upon their backs and tails, and though they feared no man, they ate grass like the ox. Yet strange was their breath, for as they grazed, their bellies filled with gases, and when they exhaled near flame, their breath would ignite like the blast of a furnace. The people trembled at the sight, for even the mighty warriors dared not provoke such creatures. Then did the kingdom of Cain unleash their own beasts, fierce and terrible, trained to battle the giants. But the war was brutal. Beasts clashed with beasts, and the ground shook with their fury. Men perished in great numbers, and their cries were heard from the highlands to the ocean edge. And worst of all, the cattle, most of all the cattle, were slaughtered in the wake of the battle. Most of all the cattle were killed. Most of all the cattle were killed. Most of all the cattle were killed. When I, Methuselah, beheld the ruin of the land, the bloodshed, the beasts, and the sorrow of the people, my heart was stirred. I said within myself, how did the world come to this? How did men fall so far, and who allowed such power to rise unchecked? So I sought the beginning. I desired to speak with one who had seen the first light, the first garden, and the first breath of man, and I journeyed until I came to the oldest of men, to Adam, the first man formed from the dust. And when I stood before him, his face was lined with the grief of ages. I bowed and asked, tell me, Father of all living, how did this world begin, and how did it fall into such chaos? Then Adam, with sorrow in his eyes and a voice like fading wind, began to speak. In the beginning, he said, all was good. The world was fresh, and the breath of the Most High walked with us in the garden. But we turned away. And Adam said unto me, Methuselah, in the beginning, the Most High made all things perfect. Not a blemish was found in creation, for it was fashioned by his hand and held together by his breath. The sun renewed its strength with each rising, and the earth was full of life, ever fresh and ever fruitful. The climate of the world restored itself with ease, and waters sprang from beneath, rising like mist from the deep, then returning again in quiet cycles, pure, unceasing, and good. He raised his hand and looked to the sky as if seeing it anew. The land, the stone, the beast, and the wind, every cycle was set in balance. From the worm in the soil to the mighty creature that grazed the mountainside, all were formed to eat the grass of the field. No fang pierced flesh, and no blood was shed. Each creature knew its place, and no corner of the earth was empty. Each space was filled with life, teeming and vibrant. And it was made for man, that he might walk with joy and know the works of his Maker. But then Adam's voice trembled, and his gaze fell. But after the sin, all was broken. The harmony shattered. Beasts turned against one another. Creatures that once lived in peace began to devour. And man, who was to rule in wisdom, now taught the beasts to kill. He took them and shaped them into weapons, and the earth groaned beneath the weight of their war. The soil drinks blood, the air carries cries, and the world rushes toward destruction. It is lost, Methuselah. There is no return. And I, Methuselah, with a heavy heart, looked upon Adam and asked, is there hope? Is there yet a turning point for mankind? Can the earth be healed? Can the beasts and the living things return to what they were? Or are we doomed to watch all creation fade into death? Adam turned his face from me, and for a long while, he said nothing. Then, with a voice like thunder muffled by grief, he answered, there is no return. The beasts cannot be made what they once were. The order is broken. They war with each other, and the stronger devour the weak. Even the earth cannot carry this weight. The skies will grow dim, the warmth will flee, and cold shall swallow all, ice shall come, and death will reign. He bowed his head low. There is no hope, not from the earth. Then he lifted his eyes to mine, and something ancient stirred in them, a glimmer. But God, in his mercy, has spoken. A promise has been made. A seed shall come. One who will crush the head of the serpent. He will rise from among us, born of woman, and he shall bear the curse, though he himself is without fault. Through him, all who believe shall live, though the world dies around them. I was silent, for I had never heard such a thing. And Adam said, watch for him, Methuselah. He will come, though not in our time. Write down what you see, for the days are evil, but the word of God endures. And I, Methuselah, said unto Adam, how can this be? If the world is ending, if death swallows every beast, and the last cattle falls in the dust, how will a Savior come? If the earth shakes and the mountains break, if the oceans leave their bounds and cover the land, if all the cycles cease and nothing green remains, how will there be life enough for a child to be born? How will anyone survive? Adam looked at me with sorrow, but also with something deeper, something like quiet fire. It will not come by the strength of men, he said, nor by the wisdom of beasts. When the earth begins to break, when the waters rise and the skies grow dark, the Most High will act. For though judgment must come, God has not forgotten his promise. I could hardly believe it, but how? I said. Adam said, God will preserve a remnant. Just as he clothes the lilies in the valley and gives breath to the sparrow, he will keep safe a line through which the promise will come. All may perish, but not all will be lost. And my spirit trembled within me, for I understood, judgment was coming. But so too was mercy. After I, Methuselah, departed from Adam, my heart heavy with the weight of his words, I journeyed to the center of the kingdom of Cain. I wanted to see with my own eyes what this world had become, and what I saw tore at my soul. The city was full of noise and smoke and blood. The righteous, those who still feared the Most High, were being hunted. They were dragged from caves, from forests, from mountaintops, and from far-off islands. They were brought in chains to the center, where crowds watched them be mocked, tortured, or slain. Some were not killed outright, but their names were made known to all, so that wherever they went, men would harm them. The kingdom of Cain would not rest until every last righteous soul was wiped from the face of the earth. And I learned that the search was not only local. Cain's followers crossed oceans, walked deserts, climbed mountains. They sought out every land beneath the sun, looking for those who would not bow to their idols, who would not join in their dark rituals and sacrifices. The evil they did, they called it holy. They defiled the land and claimed it was sacred. They shed innocent blood and called it peace. And I was told a horror greater still. Some among them had taken the daughters of men and corrupted them with fallen beings. From these unions came great giants, men of mighty stature and fierce rage. These were not born for peace, but for war, and they spread violence wherever they walked. They trampled cities, enslaved the weak, and filled the earth with terror. This wickedness grew without end. And I, Methuselah, stood in the midst of it and felt the earth groan beneath my feet. As I, Methuselah, stood among the people, I searched every face, old and young, rich and poor, hoping to find one soul who mourned the evil. One heart that did not rejoice in bloodshed. But there was none. Surely, I thought, some must weep in secret. Some must hide from the wickedness. Perhaps a mother who shields her children. Perhaps a man who walks away instead of joining the mockers. But I found no such one. Every man was filled with violence. Every woman had cast off modesty and truth. Even the children, who once would have played in the fields, now laughed at cruelty and delighted in shame. They learned from the wickedness of their fathers and embraced it even more. There was no innocence left. No mercy. No fear of God. There was no righteousness. No justice. No compassion. The land was stained, and every breath of wind carried sorrow. And I knew then, Adam was right. There was no return. The world had fallen past the point of healing. The wound was too deep. And yet, a promise still echoed in my soul. And so, as the last remnants of innocence vanished from the face of the earth, the Most High, in his sorrow, began to stir the deep. Mankind had filled the land with blood, and the beasts had been turned into monsters of war. Yet judgment had not come swiftly, it came in waves. Beneath the oceans, where the darkness is thick and the pressure great, the earth began to groan. And from the deepest cracks of the sea floor, fire awakened. Volcanoes, hidden far below, began to stir. At first it was ash, black, bitter, and choking, rising up through the water, clouding the seas, killing the fish by the thousands. Then came the strange substance, a molten flow, thick and unnatural, that did not sink but spread across the ocean surface. It cooled to a porous, floating rock, wide as valleys and long as mountain chains. It drifted and spread, forming a dark, lifeless lake atop the sea. And this, they said, was the world's greatest volcano. It covered, cubits upon cubits, of the surface of the deep. The waters beneath grew poisoned. The fish died. Birds flew no more across that sea. And when the sun tried to shine, it was dimmed by the ash that rose even to the heavens. Then came the cold snow began to fall, first in the highlands, then on the plains. It did not melt. The land, once green, began to freeze. Crops failed. Trees stood barren. The winds grew sharp and death crept through the villages like a silent hunter. Yet the people did not turn. Even now, with their cattle gone, their children cold, their stomachs empty, they still rebelled. They cursed the skies. They praised their idols. They mocked the name of the Most High. And I, Methuselah, stood and watched it all, and I wept. And as the floating land spread across the sea, carried by the great ocean currents, some saw in it not a curse, but a chance. Among the people, there were those who fled the crumbling cities and the burning coastlines. They gathered what they could, seeds, tools, and the last of their cattle, and made their way onto this strange new land that floated like a raft upon the deep. Its surface was rough and black, filled with holes like a sponge, but it was solid beneath their feet. They called it salvation. There, on that drifting land, they planted what little vegetation they had brought with them. They built simple shelters. They raised their children far from the chaos of Cain's kingdom. And most of all, they were safe. For the great reptiles, those mighty beasts that once ruled the land and devoured all in their path, could not reach them on the open sea. The floating land became a refuge, a haven, a wandering island. It drifted, first east, then west, swept by unseen hands through every sea. For a time, life was calm. The sun shone on that place. The storms passed it by. They thought perhaps they had escaped the curse. Perhaps they would begin again. But what they did not know was that judgment follows, even onto the sea. But even the sea was no refuge. The kingdom of Cain, in its pride and madness, reached further. They had raised up flying beasts, serpents with wings like banners of shadow, reptiles so vast their wings could block the sun. These creatures were trained for destruction. The rulers of Cain sent them to the drifting land, the floating island that had become a sanctuary for the few. And the beasts obeyed. They came in the night. With shrieks that split the air, they descended. Their claws tore through shelters, their fire scorched the crops. They snatched up cattle and children alike, and the people who had escaped the violence of the land were once again swallowed by it. There was no safe place left. Not on land, not on sea. It was then, at the edge of despair, that God fulfilled his promise. Noah had been born, righteous in a world that had forgotten what righteousness was. He lived not far from the place where the garden once stood, in a land still untouched by the kingdom of Cain. And though the world was collapsing, Noah walked with God. He kept the animals in peace, preserved the ways of truth, and did not give himself to idols or bloodshed. And I, Methuselah, went to him. I told him all that I had seen, from the beasts to the floating land, from Adam's words to the cries of the dying. Noah listened. He did not tremble. He did not doubt. For God had already spoken to him. And God said to Noah, I will bring a flood upon the whole earth, to cleanse it, but you, build an ark. For through you, I will save a remnant. You and your house, and the creatures I send to you, shall live. So Noah began. With axe and hammer, he built. Not in haste, but in obedience. And I stood with him, helping where I could, recording all I saw. For the time of mercy was ending, and the time of judgment was near. And as Noah toiled to build the ark, the world grew darker still. The volcano's fury did not cease. Its ash cloaked the sky, blotting out the sun's warm light. Cold descended upon the land like a shroud. Snow began to fall heavier, blanketing the earth in silence and ice. The roads that once carried the feet of men and cattle hardened and cracked beneath the frost. Even the floating island, once a refuge for the scattered, began to freeze along its edges, turning black stone into brittle ice. The rivers slowed, the trees shed their last leaves, and the breath of life seemed to grow faint. Yet Noah labored on, his hands raw, his spirit steadfast. Though the cold crept ever nearer, and the world seemed to crumble beneath his feet, he built. For he trusted the promise, the covenant of the Most High, that through the ark, life would endure. And so it came to pass, as Noah labored and the ark was completed, the world reached a point beyond all hope. The beasts had devoured every last cattle and creature across the lands, leaving no survivors save those preserved in the place where Noah dwelt. The earth groaned under the weight of corruption, and the people who remained were hardened beyond return, without conscience, without mercy, their hearts sealed in darkness. I, Methuselah, grew old and weary. I knew my time was near, and I could not enter the ark. Yet I bore witness to the end of all things. When Noah stepped into the ark, the heavens and earth trembled as never before. The very foundations of the world broke apart and shifted. Tsunami upon tsunami rose, swallowing cities, forests, and mountains alike. The land was rent asunder, and the places where men had built their homes were swallowed into the earth's deep, wiped away without trace. Only the great beasts roamed still, creatures mighty and fierce, yet no match for the coming flood. As the waters rose, these beasts swam and floated upon the endless sea, devouring what remained, drifting for months upon the waves. But at last, the flood covered the entire earth. The beasts, too, weary and defeated, sank to rest. Their bones were laid down beneath the waters, to be sealed in stone, marking the ages to come.